Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, the CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and a contributing columnist on CIO.com. Twice a month, we produce this video show and podcast, which is streaming live to you on LinkedIn and IDG's Tech Talk channel on YouTube. Today's episode is sponsored by Cisco, the worldwide leader in technology that powers the internet. Cisco inspires new possibilities by reimagining your applications, securing your data, transforming your infrastructure, and empowering your teams for the future. Learn more about what they're up to at newsroom.cisco.com. We welcome all of our viewers who are with us today to join in this conversation with questions of your own. We have a social media editor who is watching for those on LinkedIn and on YouTube and will do her best to pass them along so I can share them with my guest today. And that guest is, to our great fortune, Alan Cullip, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of DaVita. Denver-based DaVita is an $11.5 billion global healthcare provider that specializes in kidney care and dialysis services. The company today serves more than 200,000 patients at more than 2,800 outpatient dialysis centers around the U.S. and several hundred more in 10 countries around the world. Globally, the company employs 70,000 people, with 55,000 of those healthcare teammates working here in the U.S. Alan Cullip has been leading DaVita's information technology and digital strategy since 2012, which includes all aspects of global IT and operations and digital strategy. In 2019, Alan was inducted into our CIO Hall of Fame, and just this year, I think about 2 months ago, he was named Colorado CIO of the Year in the leadership category of the Orby Awards. Before making his mark as a leading healthcare company CIO, Alan served as the CIO at TriZetto Corp, Berkshire Hathaway NetJets, and Cendant Corp, plus many others before that. Alan, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks, Mary Fran, and thank you. That was quite humbling introduction there. So excited to be here.
I get that from far too many of my CIO friends. They're always protesting all of their accomplishments. Let me see. Let's start out at that big 30 to 50,000 foot view about industry disruption and talking about the impact. I think it's especially meaningful for healthcare providers about the impact of the last year that we've been all working our way through the pandemic and the COVID crisis. Tell me how things are going for you out there in Denver with DaVita.
They're going quite well, and certainly I would say the last 16 months or so has been challenging for I think all of us. So when I think about quite honestly, healthcare, I think really rose to the occasion and has done a tremendous job across the board. So first of all, I would give a shout out to everyone who provides care, who lives on the front lines, does all of the tremendous jobs that those on the front lines do, and really stepped forward to ensure that I think that the best care was provided throughout this.
Yes.
And I think for us, from a technology perspective, we had the humbling job of quite honestly providing care, or services for them so that they could be at their best. And there was a number of changes that had to take place.
Yes.
We have a number of teammates that, and we call our employees teammates. We have a number of teammates that essentially work remotely, but the majority actually work live in our centers. And we had to do many things to organize our centers to be safe environments for our patients, but also for our teammates and our physician partners.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of things that really came into play there in terms of just changes to our clinical systems, and we write and create our own clinical systems. So we operate off of our own EMR. And so there was a lot of software changes and a lot of things that we had to do really to accommodate
Hmm.
COVID, and
Yeah.
how you track it, how you manage patients, how you divide across multiple clinics. In addition to that, we have more than 10,000 teammates that actually support that remaining 55,000 or so more
Hmm.
that work in our centers or in our clinics out in the field. So we had to get all of those teammates remote and
Yeah.
to really prepare for that. So it's been a lot of work while still trying to maintain and keep priorities on track for
Right.
other initiatives as well.
Yes.
So challenging times, very busy. It seems like a very fast 16 months
Doesn't
for
it?
many of us.
Doesn't it? I feel like today, as we start kind of breaking out into the world again, and as more people are vaccinated, and even going to lunch in a restaurant still feels a little anxiety producing for a lot of us. I wanted to circle back to something you said about, you mentioned how you essentially have your own a customized EMR, and that's the electronic medical record. And is that, I know that there are a lot of hospital systems that use third party providers for that. Tell us about DaVita's. Did you essentially grow your own with an EMR because you are such a specialty healthcare provider?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. We essentially, I think, when we looked at the hospital systems, they're great systems from the third
Mhm.
party providers, certainly state of the art
Yes.
systems for providing care, but they're primarily designed, I would say, for hospitals, and
Hmm.
hospitals, think of it, have to be, I say, 100 feet deep in 1,000 topics, and
Well,
we are what I say a mile deep in kidney care. And
right,
so,
right.
from the activity of providing dialysis for our end stage renal patients, as well as providing chronic kidney disease and
Mhm.
advice on how to slow your progression or hopefully stop your progression, and the work that we do there, it's very different. And what we found was, the third party software products were just not as deep as we wanted to go.
Right.
So if you think about just volume wise, we perform more than 30 million dialysis treatments a year. And
Wow.
so, when you think about depth and how far that goes, and the
Mhm.
really that's very different than what exists kind of in what I would say standard commercial software or commercial
Yeah.
care.
Well, and no sooner do we get through the first year of the pandemic and all the various challenges that brought, and then there was the availability of vaccines. And I think I saw in the earnings call with your CEO that at this point you've got well more than 75% of your patients who seek care with DaVita have already been taken care of with their vaccines.
Yes, we're very proud of that, and
Yeah.
I think in terms of we were given, I think the dialysis community has a special relationship for those that are dialyzed in our centers. We see them every 3 days. So if you think
Hmm.
about it, you form a very strong relationship with those patients,
Yes.
and they are tops and on our list. So ensuring that they got vaccinated and our teammates did as well,
Hmm.
was just top priority for us, or really
Yeah.
priority one.
Yeah. Well, and I know I want to get more into talking about some of these advancing technologies in telemedicine and the things that have been happening, even with artificial intelligence and the way it's been helping. But before that, I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about how you have your IT team structured to deliver all of these services to all of those thousands of places where work is going on from DaVita. Your team size worldwide, talk about the size of it and how you have structured it. I know you've been with DaVita more than 9 years, but most CIOs I know are usually every few years they shake things up and restructure and move things around. So tell us what that structure looks like today and what sort of changes you needed to make during the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say one of the big pieces was we were fortunate in that we are very global and very distributed. So
Yes.
we have about 2,000 guest teammates and teammates that work that work with DaVita, and
Mhm.
so and from that perspective, I think it was just extremely important from a perspective that we had about 250 people that worked remote full time before the pandemic.
Mhm.
So, and because we're so broadly distributed across the globe, uh, we were used to kind of operating semi-remotely, even for those teammates and guest teammates that worked in fixed locations.
Mhm.
So that helped us in terms of, I think, being able to really cascade. But that being
Yeah.
said, we really had to amp up our thoughts and our game, I would say, in regards to agile development, because a big portion, the reason why we have a large team is that we do our own software development. So we're very
Yeah.
much, somewhat resemblant, I would say, to a commercial company that produces software. So we
Mhm.
have a big portion of the organization that's dedicated to that. That being said, we also have teams that run packaged applications and commercially available software as well.
Right.
And those run kind of very differently in terms of how you structure and organize those. So from that perspective, we came together and sort of learned, I would say, a lot about just how to improve collaboration across the pandemic. Even though
Mhm.
we had, I would say, a jump start out of the gate because we
Yeah.
were already partially there.
Yeah. Well, and when we talk about improving collaboration, I know that from articles I've seen you quoted in over the years that DaVita has always been very intentional about that collaboration and intentional about its culture, about the work culture that you have. And that's another common question I've been asking a lot of my CIO friends on this program is what did the last year, what impact did that have on your culture? Because a lot of times a company culture has as much to do with things around the water cooler and face-to-face ability to whiteboard. So when you think back over the last year, tell us about some of those changes that you had to make and what you hope will live on after the pandemic is after we put this all behind us.
Sure. I think intentionality. I think we had to really up our games in terms of communications and how we communicated because we no longer had the water cooler type experiences. We did host virtual meetings because the team was so dispersed
Hmm.
beforehand, but we really increased communications. I would say probably sixfold,
Yeah.
maybe tenfold in terms of both written communications, the amount of virtual meetings that we were doing,
Hmm.
and taking time because, again, I would say the pandemic taught us a number of things that I think because we're so focused on our culture, we already knew to a certain extent, but I would say it validated
Hmm.
that really it's people and those that you work with that make you great. And so
Yes.
you need to. I think one of the big things that this taught us was just amping up the communications and the empathy for
Hmm.
those that uh, both I would say our patients, our teammates, and our physicians in terms of support because there were so many things that were dynamically happening away from the workplace.
Yeah.
Right, many of us had parents that we were worried about. We had children. Many were having to now learn how to be school teachers, in
Yes.
addition to trying to manage their day jobs. So we essentially just became very supportive and provided kind of lots of tips and help
Hmm.
to those who needed it,
Yeah.
both from you know stress reduction and exercises that we did
Hmm.
to some of the stuff that we did because in addition to the pandemic there was a tremendous amount I think of focus on social injustice and so
Yes.
we created active forums for listening and belonging. And
Hmm.
some of the stuff that I feel probably most proud about, if you look at my entire career as a technologist, was actually the way that I think we managed and supported our teams throughout.
Yeah. Well, and I know from the interviews I've seen with you over the years, you almost always talk about listening skills and teams. And I feel like you were talking about the empathetic leadership qualities that are so important kind of years before it became in vogue. So kudos to you on that one. Let me ask about one thing that I think was such an assumption beforehand that people needed to do it together, and that was like the scrum meetings and agile teams and that sort of thing. And most every forward looking and excellent organizations have a whole variety, if not all of their development happening in agile. What did you tell us a little bit about how that transition worked for you? What did you have to do?
We essentially, yeah, first of all, it was one of the things that made us most nervous, right?
Mm,
Was, were we going to disrupt software development, and how was that
yeah.
going to work? Because we have teams and product teams that work hand in hand
Mhm.
to, and if you're familiar with the traditional in office or sort of physical agile setup, I mean, you've got five workspaces that face each other in very close proximity. There's
Yeah.
about 2 feet of distance between,
Mm.
because those groups are so actively working together and collaborating. And
Yes.
so uh, for us, what we did essentially was we leveraged a lot of the kind of collaboration tools, whiteboarding tools, and again used I would say a lot of those capabilities. At the end of the day,
Hmm.
we saw and we tracked it, because we sort of understand the metrics of how all this works. And
Hmm.
across the first probably 6 weeks, we saw about a 10-15% drop in productivity. By 3 months later, we were actually back at productivity, and actually a little higher than it had been before.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of intentionality in terms of
Right.
driving the communications. But because of some of that intentionality, I think it actually helped us to make productivity actually slightly higher than it was before.
Yeah.
So some
Well,
good lessons to carry forward.
well, and it's funny that I've had so many conversations in recent months with CIOs who got at one point a little worried about all the productivity because people were working at, it seemed like 30% higher productivity in some areas, and it makes you start wondering about that whole work-life balance, which got, I think, completely skewed probably during the pandemic. We have our first question from the audience about whether you could, and this is very well timed because we were about to talk more about it, briefly explaining what DaVita's AI strategy is and the data governance initiatives that you've undertaken as part of that. And I know that they often do go hand in hand because it's
They do.
AI, of course, is all about the advanced analytics. So
Very
give us the big picture and some examples maybe of that.
sure. When we started, I became CIO here 9 years ago.
Hmm.
At 8.5 years ago, one of the first initiatives that I launched was on master data management,
Yeah.
and really organizing and aligning data. You can't, it's kind of getting the nuggets of gold out of all of the rest,
Yeah.
from that perspective to me. And if you don't have a good structure to organize data, it's a lot harder to make analytics work for you,
Oh, yeah.
and AI. So that was, and we probably had a, kick that off with a governance process that I had our chief medical officer and then several key business stakeholders who we call data stewards involved. So we did it very much in a collaborative way with our business partners to define, what are data definitions? How do we
Hmm.
go about organizing data? And that took about a 3-year period of time. So
Wow.
it's a
Yeah,
journey
it
because
is.
we have lots and lots of data in terms of, think of it as we've got at this point about 20 years of longitudinal data
Hmm.
on our patients and this disease state. So there's a lot of things that you can learn from having a long timeline. AI is
Yeah.
much more effective, I think, as many on the call probably realize and know, that if you have kind of good set of longitudinal data, you
Hmm.
can do some techniques to kind of, it's 6 months and to try and replicate, but you do need at least we've found 6 months of good data
Hmm.
in order to for the AI and the predictability of the models to actually work.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, we then embarked on really ideation sessions that we held with the business to uncover, what were kind of our big problems or areas of opportunity. So there was essentially we formed what was called an AI COE, or a Center of Excellence around AI,
Good.
and invited our business partners, and then we went to actually each of the areas across the business and held these ideation sessions, both to educate people on what AI is and is not and isn't,
Yeah.
because I think there was quite a bit of probably hype that came into the space in terms of what AI was and wasn't.
Yeah.
And so we educated on what it was, and then also what were practical, use cases and things that they could relate to, where you could think of business problems that would be likely good candidates for AI.
Hmm.
And so, if you think about that, it boils into, AI is very good to me at seeing seas of continuously changing data. So if you've got
Yeah.
individuals, right, that are trying to essentially look at lots and lots of disparate data that's regularly changing,
Hmm.
AI can coalesce that and provide sort of great insights. So we found that, or there were opportunities where we just didn't have, we there was a set of logic, but we weren't as fully covered perhaps across a topic as we would want to be. So like one kind of simple example of that in the back office was expense reports.
Oh.
We essentially had teams that random spot checked expense reports, and they couldn't essentially get through all of them. From that perspective, it allowed us to be able to create a capability. Uh, we're doing stuff also with recruiting and sort of learning how what are the characteristics, the attributes, and using AI. We get millions of resumes
Hmm.
each year, and really, from a recruiter and a recruiting perspective, right, it's really difficult, right, to sort through all of the millions and millions of those. So AI is actually helping us to understand, what attributes to look
Hmm.
for in resumes and in some of the chat conversations that occur,
Hmm.
that allow us to uh, get get teammates that are more likely to be successful
Yeah.
and to thrive. So it's that, and then I haven't even talked about clinical, right? So there's been a ton of work in clinical in terms of
Yes.
helping us with predictive capabilities, which
Hmm.
is probably the most important. But I know that many on the call may not be in healthcare, so wanted to touch on a few of the back office ones as well.
Well, I think that's a great idea, and also I've found that that CIOs and IT leaders across various industries really enjoy these kind of conversations because it sparks that what you are doing with AI in different areas probably sparks an idea that would be more applicable to their industry. And I think, and I know we are going to talk a little bit more about the AI and telemedicine aspects. We've got another question, though, that I think fits well into our discussion right now. And this was about the collaboration that we had been talking about, since collaboration is something that's a core value and something you value a lot at DaVita. Can you help our listening audience understand how the teams are aligned around collaboration that also keeps a focus on business outcomes? Is that part of it is the collaboration isn't just a feel good everybody working together. It's probably, especially when you think about agile and scrum teams and everything, there's more of a focus on business outcomes and the products that are being produced here. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I would say I'm fortunate that I joined the village with or DeVita with essentially a mindset towards continuous improvement. So,
Hmm.
and to get continuous improvement, you have to maintain a focus on business and business outcomes. But
Hmm.
we say there's a nice way to do that, right? And so there's a collaborative way and a and a culturally smart way to approach, right, how you interact with others.
Hmm.
But we've improved outcomes for our patients over the last 20, now 21 years in a row. So there's a tremendous focus to continue in that vein, which keeps us kind of heavily focused on business outcomes. And we just a lot of our metrics are tuned to really take us back to the patient and keep us heavily focused on what matters most,
Hmm.
and actually driving results year over year.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would say, we have collaborative meetings that are just designed to learn about each other and to
Hmm.
understand our unique journeys that everyone has had.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, I think, the more people can connect, I always thought of it as people connect emotionally first, and then they connect logic second. So if
Yeah.
I have an emotional connection with you, Mary Fran,
Hmm.
then I'm much more likely to listen to the logic that you're trying to provide, or
Right.
or drive the business purpose that you're trying to drive. So
Yeah. Well,
so anyway, that's
in
how
an
we think about
industry, yeah, and in an industry like yours, Alan, I would imagine that a business outcome is really, we're talking about patient outcomes, because the success of the business is so tied to the success of your patients. And before we leave this topic entirely, I also wanted to, that collaboration and that spirit of working together, I had one last question about that, and whether you had any advice to share with your peers and other IT leaders out there about how to navigate the coming year when we're going to have some employees, maybe a lot of them, coming back into office environments, but still many more than you had before that will be working remotely. What are some of does that change anything significantly in the way you are leading those 2,000 IT people around the world that work for DaVita?
I would say, I mean, we are distributed today, so
Hmm.
I don't have the luxury of having 2,000 people in one location, uh,
Right.
and and we do that for a couple of reasons, right? One, we are globally distributed, but more importantly, I'm more interested in you as an individual
Hmm.
and the talents that you provide, as opposed to where you choose to live. So
Right.
from that perspective, so we were very diverse before. We are now, we will be coming back. And I think there's certainly, I think the pandemic has taught us many things, one of which was its advanced kind of many capabilities that and tested many things that people weren't sure about, right? Which is, could you actually be as productive working remote? Could you,
Hmm.
essentially, could it work from a cultural standpoint? And I think we've managed a lot of that. That being said, I still am excited to essentially have people be able to get back together in their local environments. I just
Yeah.
think there is a benefit to human connection, as exciting
Hmm.
as seeing everyone on video is,
Yes.
and getting a chance to bond in that way. So, but exactly right. I think we'll manage several different models in our business partners, but
Hmm.
ultimately, we will do it in a way that kind of keeps our patients first in mind, and maintaining our culture and doing what we need to do culturally. And I think some of the being back in the office is just really important for new for people that are new
Hmm.
and new teammates. It's a little easier, I think, for those that have relationships, and strong relationships to move
Yes, through
to
that
move
before.
to move
Hmm.
remote and continue so there's some of that work I'm excited to do and excited to have kind of folks be able to get into the office on a periodic basis. So.
Hmm. Well, and I've had a couple of conversations, very interesting ones from a technology perspective, with CIOs who are wondering how they're going to make sure a meeting is very kind of in a democratized. How do you democratize all the communication that has to happen in a meeting if you have a couple of people that are on the screen and then a couple of people that are around the conference table? That someone made the point that when you're on Zoom or a video conferencing application and everybody's there, you've got a level playing field. But are you looking at any technologies that will advance kind of the state of how you use video conferencing when you've got that hybrid situation of people there and people not there?
We're looking at actually a couple of different technologies. And so
Interesting.
one that we're uh, essentially, we had a pretty good video conference presence
Mm-hmm.
in our conference rooms before the pandemic because of the global nature of the company.
Sure.
But we are looking at a couple of different options about, how do we create more of a feeling of, for those that are remote and dialing in, how do we create a little more sense of belonging, almost as I
Mm-hmm.
call it, how do you replicate the Brady Bunch functionality that you get with Zoom or WebEx,
Yes.
and from that perspective, so that, like you said, it doesn't feel like there's five in a room and there's two on the phone that are kind of left alone. But we were dealing kind of with that situation, I would say, even before
Ah,
COVID happened,
yeah.
because we, had because of the distributed nature of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
but I am excited that I think technology, sorry, seems to be moving forward to continue to, make huge advances, both of
mhm.
that and I would say how virtual meetings, on a broad scale occur. There's
Yeah.
some pretty exciting, I think, stuff that is going on there, and we've been testing that. So some of our meetings likely will not come back to being big gatherings, or they will move to being periodic
Yes.
from that perspective. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I've heard a
so
lot of people say that they don't see any reason, like for big town halls, where once a month, say they have to drag everybody in from the field. It's hard to say now which of our behaviors have permanently changed because of the last 16 months. But I think probably a year from now, we'll know a little bit more about that. And I was thinking as technology has played a huge role in healthcare for a long time now, but is getting bigger all the time, when we think about improving those outcomes for patients, how has that how do you communicate well about that with your patient population, which is older and probably, people in kidney care situations and in dialysis usually are, I was going to say baby boomers and older. How has that gone? And after we talk about that a little bit, I'd like to talk a little more also about the AI pieces of that have made it more engaging.
yeah, the I think one of the things that the pandemic has done, it probably advanced telemedicine in healthcare.
Okay.
I think in terms of adoption, it's probably 5, 10 years acceleration. And so when the pandemic occurred, the essentially the regulatory and the government agencies, right, realized that, hey, we actually need telemedicine. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think for us, the nice news is we created a holistic patient application that included telemedicine. And so
Okay.
it was being used primarily for our home population. And so those are our folks that choose to do dialysis at their home.
Right.
And so there was a use case, or a very good use case, for that kind of application
Hmm.
because we see those patients monthly instead of every 3 days. Uh, for
Hmm.
telemedicine, if you see someone every 3 days, it's probably not as needed per se, but in that home space, it definitely was. But
Yeah.
we combined telemedicine with remote monitoring capabilities. So we measure, you actually have connected scales, blood pressure, pulsometers, those kind of things, as well as some AI driven chat to help you with reminders. And so, because a
Okay.
lot of that population, to take us, like you said, into that AI piece,
Hmm.
is a lot of our patients, right, are elderly and therefore may not have the acuity or the eyesight anymore, right,
Yes.
to be smartphone experts.
Hmm.
I'm not sure that I consider myself a smartphone expert, but the but certainly, so what we did was we tried to voice enable a lot of this,
Okay.
so that you can actually uh, you know, you can speak and
Hmm.
and relay how you're doing. It'll remind you to take your meds. You take the most amount of oral medications of any, I would say, in kidney disease than any other disease state. And so,
Really?
that
Okay.
can be as much as 22 pills a day. And so,
Wow.
yeah, and so, helping people to keep up and remind them about that, remind them
Hmm.
about appointments, and also just provide education and tips
Hmm.
is just super important. And some of the things that we're excited about is some of the peer group collaboration that we're able to do is, able to facilitate through this as well, which is,
Oh, really?
essentially, right, if you have kidney disease, you can talk to other folks who have kidney disease and, learn, similarly, I guess, to what we're doing today is, we can learn from others and our patients, I think, really enjoy that and respond to it quite well.
Yeah. Well, when we had talked earlier, you mentioned and you called it an umbrella application. And I'm sure that's not the official name of it, but tell me more about that. Is that involved with this patient workflow and with things that you're doing in telemedicine?
It is. So we have the application is called DaVita Care Connect, and
Okay.
that our patients use. But I think of it as an umbrella application in that we essentially are providing kind of a seamless experience
Yeah.
to our patients, or an orchestrated experience. But a lot of the technology that underlies it is not technology that we created at DaVita. And so we just created an opportunity for essentially our patients to have a single frame and a single login, which is important, right? From that perspective, because there's many disparate technologies that help with telemedicine, secure chatting, how you run
Hmm.
interactive education and connected, like I said, chat sessions. There's just a number of those. There really wasn't a need for us to create those because we can get those from third-party providers. But
Right, right.
we didn't want, right, and didn't think we'd get, any level of adoption if we were asking our patients to just log into these 16 different applications,
Wow.
in order to create an experience for you.
Right.
So we brought all those together under one platform, and one sort of branding from that perspective.
Hmm.
The nice news is too, you can essentially change what's going on within the application based on what's going on with the patient. So
Hmm.
therefore, you can. If a patient is interested, or you're wanting them to get certain kinds of education, or if
Hmm.
you're wanting to connect them to peer groups, or you're wanting them to kind of remind them of appointments, or
Hmm.
ask how they're feeling and doing, all of that can be curated at a per patient level, which is
Yeah.
exciting as well.
Well, and I imagine too that there's so much that's happening in consumer technologies that is helpful for this. I know I've got, grandchildren under the age of 5 who will say, Alexa, play me such and such, or, might speak to Siri or say, okay, Google. And have you found as the CIO and the creator behind all of this, were you surprised at how easily these technologies were taken up? How did you, because I know you do a lot of collaborative work between your technology and business teams, or your patient care teams, and what was the uptake like? Was it a pleasant surprise that everybody just grabbed onto it?
It was, I think,
Hmm.
and it puts a lot of pressure on you to make whatever you're doing valuable.
Hmm.
It puts obviously it has to work. Nobody would talk to Alexa or to Google or Siri, right? If it
Yes.
returned nonsense or so to speak. So you really have to think through how do you go about responding to things?
Hmm.
And in healthcare, it's highly regulated, right? So you also have to, have a lot of, we get a tremendous amount of support from our legal and compliance groups as well,
Hmm.
to make sure that, that what we're doing, it makes sense and is acceptable and,
Yeah.
in the world we live in.
Well, and we got a very specific and tactical question about this from our audience. Are you providing patients with a custom iPad type device to use this app, or is it just something they can access and use more generally from their chosen device? How does that work?
We actually do provide a device,
Oh, good.
and
Mhm.
but it will also work from your device. So
Oh,
I
interesting.
would say we're agnostic, right?
Hmm.
In terms of whether you want to bring your own or essentially you want a DaVita device. So we made it
Okay.
to where it will work on tablets or iPads,
Hmm.
uh, and which is an exciting part about what we do from a consumer perspective, right? Which is you've got in DaVita's environment, because of the security that we feel that Apple devices give us, we're Apple from
Hmm.
that perspective. But when we're dealing with our consumer population or our patient population, it's much more consumer oriented. They have all kinds of devices.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that it would work on whatever. It works on a laptop, on a
Hmm.
tablet, of various kinds, as well as smartphones.
Yeah.
Um, and and I would say that's true for our physicians as well. Most of our physicians have Apple devices, but some
Mhm.
have Android-based devices as well. So
Yes.
it's important in those areas that we just we meet folks with the technology that works best for them.
Yes. Well, and you're in that kind of enviable position where you can create and productize some of these technologies yourselves. So you essentially have like a little software company operating inside DaVita. Am I characterizing that correctly?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So I would say probably you know gosh, 13, 1,400 of the people we have are making software,
Oh.
and so that
Mhm.
gives us kind of a nice advantage, right? Versus I think probably those that don't have the capability, but
Mhm.
we're vigilant, right? We don't want to build what we could commercially buy.
Right,
So
right.
uh, you
Well,
know. Uh,
Well, I know you've been around, we've both been around IT long enough to remember when that was just not very common to find, like very capable data engineering and software company capabilities inside of other businesses that weren't, necessarily technology vendors, right? So, was that something, have you been building up that force since you came to DaVita back in 2012, or is that something a little more recent? I feel like I have a lot of talks these days with CIOs about acquiring more of that data engineering and software engineering talent that maybe 10 years ago was being outsourced or taken from, all around the world. What is your experience with that? And was that something that you started from your beginning with them, or is it more recent?
It probably goes all the way back. I mean, I started doing software application development and then worked
Hmm.
on the commercial side of software for a number of years. And so, and which, so I had a value for that personally in terms of
Hmm.
what it does. In terms of DaVita, I think DaVita, because of that unique nature, of us being in a specialty and having the, kind of the high degree of volume that we do,
Yes.
or our size, there was a custom software mentality when I joined.
Oh,
And so,
sure.
it's certainly, transformed over the years. I would say when I joined, it was, an extensive waterfall type
Hmm.
technology group. And that's evolved sort of to be, very, very agile. And then because of healthcare, we operate in an agile way, but it's not pure agile in many of the things that we do, just because of the amount of regulatory compliance and testing that you have to do. So for
Yes.
many of these apps, if you think about it, right, people's lives are at stake. So
Hmm.
it's a very, it's kind of very serious in terms of the level of testing and some of those things that you need to do.
Yeah. Well, and I thought of that earlier when you mentioned the ability to use some AI modules in scanning resumes and recruiting and that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about your talent recruiting. I know you're in the beautiful Mile High city of Denver, but it's not Silicon Valley, and it's not even a big East Coast city. What is it, the mission base of DaVita that helps you attract talent, or do you have the same talent attraction issues that CIOs anywhere have these days, where everybody can work from anywhere?
Yeah, and I would say we're flexible. So in terms of where people are. So the good news is I'm not limited to recruiting. We
Yeah.
have East Coast teams that are doing this work. We have teams in the Southeast, teams essentially in
Hmm.
Silicon Valley, and teams in Seattle, in that
Wow.
area, as
Okay.
well as in Denver. Are kind of bigger locations for where we have, technology presence.
Hmm.
And then we've got a number of offshore, essentially big technology presences. So,
Yes.
uh, but I would say for us, yeah, I think we differentiate a little bit. There's two ways that we differentiate. We're working on exciting stuff, and because we are a company that's heavily focused on innovation and
Hmm.
improving outcomes for our patients. And I connect it to patients because I've done IT a lot of my career.
Hmm.
It's fun to do, but it's, perhaps it's not as fulfilling as doing that. In a way, you're giving back to others
Yeah.
when you're operating in healthcare.
Yeah.
So I think that combined with the fact that we do have a culture that cares, a culture of empowerment, and so we take these things very seriously. So
Yes.
kind of all of them.
Well, and I've noticed a lot of CIOs, especially if they've worked in several different industries the way you have, once they end up landing in healthcare and get with kind of a mission-based organization, it's pretty hard to pry them loose. That just there's something very fulfilling about it, isn't there?
There is,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of the folks that I'm fortunate to work with, quite
Hmm.
honestly, they could go do anything that they want to do. You have
Yes.
that level of talent and skill, and they choose to be here,
Hmm.
for the reasons I just highlighted. I think
Yeah.
they find it very fulfilling.
Well, I remember reading somewhere your initial meeting with your CEO, with Javier Rodriguez, and talking about your interest in DaVita because your own father had had kidney care issues. And so this was something of a personal mission for you as well.
It was. I hadn't worked. I'd worked in just about every vertical except for healthcare,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and my father uh, essentially passed away from kidney disease, and
Hmm.
so but I was along for that journey and just
Yeah.
saw in the medical industry that that it just we filled out our name and the information, and you had many things that just didn't seem, it just seemed like IT could really help out,
Yeah.
and that we were doing things in the more consumer side of retail and other things that were,
Hmm.
that were just allowed much better connection,
Yeah.
and certainly I probably naively dove into the space, thinking we were, that I'd have all that fixed in a just 12 months or less. But the answer is it is a very complex environment for healthcare, and it
It
occurs,
is.
it is highly regulated, and so
Hmm.
as to where a lot of the things in the consumer space are less so.
Hmm.
So your ability to do things doesn't mean that you can't do them. It just means that you've got to be more thoughtful about it, and more, I would say, communicative and inclusive about what you're doing in order for
Yes.
those things to occur.
Yeah.
But it's encouraging to see. I think the regulatory environment is embracing more what
Hmm.
I call data interoperability, and
Yeah.
some of the things that I think will certainly propel healthcare even further in the years to come.
Hmm. Well, and some of those things that you've been talking about in interviews for a number of years as well. It can feel kind of satisfying to have those some of those chickens coming home to roost. Let me our For our wrap up question, I want to ask you what the pandemic challenges of the last year have taught you as a leader. We've noted you're in the CIO Hall of Fame. You're the Colorado CIO of the Year. You've been around the block a few times being a leader. Was there anything that you took out of the last year that was something surprising to you, or something new, or something you felt like you wanted to double down on?
Yeah, I would say I don't know that it necessarily taught me new things per se,
Hmm.
but it did reinforce some things. I think first of all, it reinforced for me that that having a great culture and being focused in healthcare, patients and patient care, is an extremely fulfilling place to be. And so yes, we may have all grabbed a row and or an oar and rowed a little harder for the months during the pandemic to make things seamless and to make things work. But I think it was actually a fulfilling time for everyone that was involved with it, because it just it's something about a crisis perhaps that brings folks even more closely together.
Yes.
uh, and so which kind of brings me to back to, I think the other thing was it really taught me just even more so. I've always had a feeling of empathy and a feeling of empowerment, but for those that I work with, and it really taught me even more so that that what's going on during what occurred during this was at a much bigger level personally for people than
Hmm.
certainly even than what we were trying to accomplish from a work perspective.
Yeah.
And as you connect those dots, it just made me really pause and reflect and say, you've got to essentially have empathy, and you've got to really put yourself in other people's shoes
Hmm.
from that perspective in terms of the challenges and things that they're going through. So
Yes.
uh, and certainly it was fun, like I said, from a technology perspective, because we had the ability to accelerate a lot of really kind of leading edge technology that, like I said, I think wouldn't have might not have rolled out for or been as is more fully embraced as it is
Yes.
now for
Yeah.
probably 5 plus more years.
Yeah.
So it's fun on that front as well.
Hmm. Well, and I know, and you mentioned earlier all the attention and concerns we have now around racial equality and the greater attention that's being paid everywhere to diversity in hiring and that sort of thing. Have you, and that'll truly be my last question, have you changed anything in your own hiring and interviewing a process to try and encourage more of that diversity? I've always read about how diverse the staff and the IT operation is at DaVita even now, but is there anything more or more specific that you're doing?
Yeah, it's great. I think we've done a couple of things that we always, to me, I think, what makes you great is to have a diverse set of opinions, backgrounds, perspectives,
Hmm.
uh, and to embrace those. So, to me, that's, if you're going to be as good as you can be, having everyone that's thinks exactly alike is probably not going to get you the best outcomes or the
Correct.
best solutions. So to me, I think I've always had embraced that from that perspective. But we have done a few things. We've added essentially diverse a diverse interview panel from that perspective as a part of our interviewing processes.
Hmm.
Uh, and we always were, we before this, we essentially were requiring a diverse panel of candidates.
Yes.
But I think, some of the interview pieces, it usually ended up that the interview pieces were diverse, but we've been much more intentional to make sure that happens.
Good.
And
Hmm.
then we've created essentially a number of sessions where we're listening and learning from our diverse teammates. And so,
Hmm.
and I think that's been, extremely valuable for them, but even more so to open folks' eyes to, to kind of that perspective. And
Yes.
so it's been, I think, humbling in terms of the difference that I think we've made in a lot of people's lives. So.
Great. Great. Excellent. Well, such a good answer. Thank you so much. And thanks so much for your time today, Alan. It was really lovely to be able to catch up with you again. It's been a little while since we talked, and this was really fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's always great to see you and get some time with you. I always learn something when I talk to Mary Fran.
Somebody one time told me that they looked at my picture and they said, "Well, she looks like a very friendly know-it-all." And I thought, "Oh, good grief. I think my fifth grade teacher might have said that years ago." So I do love having a lot of questions, and you have been really great to answer them all. Thanks so much today, Alan. If you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch our full episode later today here on LinkedIn, but also on CIO.com and on YouTube's IDG Tech Talk channel. CIO Leadership Live is also available as a podcast, and that will be posted by tomorrow to wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you have enjoyed today's conversation with CIO Alan Cullop of DaVita as much as I have, and that you come back for our next episode, which will be on 2 weeks from today on Wednesday, June 16th. Again at noon Eastern here on LinkedIn and YouTube. And I'll be joined by CIO Kiran Venkamamidi, who is from Driscoll's, the berry people out in California. Thanks so much again to our sponsor, Cisco, for its support. And do take a moment to sign up for our YouTube channel, IDG Tech Talk, where you can find all of the previous episodes of CIO Leadership Live. Stay well out there, and we'll see you here next time.